All right, let's talk some simulation updates. I'll start with the basic particle graph here. So I'll create one, right click, explode that, connect the input mesh, and then connect the particles here. You can also use this terminal here, but I'll use this. By default, obviously, uh, the simulation start frame 1, my timeline is from 1001 to 1240. So what I like to do here is right click on the start frame and create a value node from here and control basically my start time from this. As soon as I do that, now we see the points, and you can see that now, yeah, we have points. They're dying at 2 seconds because the age limit is 2. Let me change a couple of things here. So I'm gonna live forever, so I'm gonna check this, and then also I'm gonna make the points a little bit smaller here. And I want to emit once, so I'll use the same node and connect it to the end frame, and for that I just need to check this guy here too. So as soon as I do that now and I press play, we emit once, and they are gonna go and go and go and go and go. Cool, awesome. All right, so what is new? Well, on the source particle node we have this new option here, pass through points, and basically what this does is what it says. It's gonna pass the point position from the input mesh into this simulation, right, into the source. So if I click here, actually let me show you quickly here. If I go into P and then let me press, let me see the wireframe here. If you will look at this mesh, it's basically gonna add a point into each vertex here. And if I click here now, we have a point into each vertex. Add a point. So that is very cool because you can create all your own custom stuff and then use that if you need to. Other way that we can use this obviously is going to be with the scatter points, right? So if I do a scatter and then let's say that your art director, creative director is asking you for 1000 points, well, now you just connect that there and you're going to be done with it. And then we have 1000 points scattered randomly. Also, if you bring an alembic from a different DCC and you have a point cloud here, you can use this and connect this directly here, and that also will work. This is a very welcome addition. Before 2.6, you could do this. It was a little bit of a hack. I just customized the source particle node. But remember that all the nodes in Bifrost, you can go inside and start customizing your nodes as you like. So we could do this before. And the other option that was close enough, it was this count per point. So if I do 1, this was close to get you 1000, but it was never really 1000. It was like 950, 960 or whatever. And if I do now pass through points, for example, you will see that we were missing some of the points. And also, just by the way, when this is checked, the ray and ray mode, they get disabled under the hood. They don't do anything anymore, which makes sense. All right, so very welcome addition. You will see also this in the npm solver, by the way, which we'll be talking about a little bit later. All right, let's move on. All right, so on the collider, we also have a new parameter here that we can play with. This is stickiness, which is pretty neat. I have a torus here. I'm gonna bring it into the graph, and I'll connect this into the collider. And what we'll do is, instead of looking at this boring gray points here, I'm gonna create a random color for the points. So I'll create a right click on the additional properties, and I'm gonna create a color property here. You can create a color here as well if you want to, but I want to create some random, so I'm gonna get the IDs from these points. So I'm saying get array indices, and then I create a random value. I'm gonna connect this index into the index, and then by default this is gonna give you a float, but we can change the port, the type, into a vector since we are dealing with color. And then here I'm gonna just say give me a random value between 0 and 1 and connect this into the base color, so we get some random color on the points. All right, cool. If I press play, just default collider, right? what we're gonna get is the typical it's just the points are gonna be colliding and bouncing around, right? Because we have a bouncing of 1, so I'm gonna lower that right away because it's too much. Yeah, so that's what we get. Cool. As soon as I add a stickiness into this, and now I press play, and actually let me just add more points because it's gonna be neater to see that. Oops. As you can see, we get an instant donut with the sprinkles on top. But basically, just the point getting stuck into the surface, right? Which can be used for many different ways. But it's a pretty neat, pretty cool addition into the solver. As you can see, some of the points when they collide, if they're in an angle, they start like going down. Obviously, we have gravity on by default, so that is affecting those points. If you don't want those points to move around, what you can do, obviously, is get this higher, so as higher as you want, basically. If I put 4, for example, probably none of the points now are going to move. They're going to get totally stuck into this torus. So that is pretty cool, and it's pretty useful. It can be used in so many different ways. One thing that I want to show also is that, or just to mention, is that remember that all these guys here, it can be used, they're auto ports basically, meaning that you can connect a field, you can connect a map, a black and white noise, or anything, right? So I have something real quick that I prepared here, a fractal noise that I already just up the magnitude and lower the frequency. And then also what I'm gonna add is a transform field, so I can transform and move around this field around. I have this locator here that I'm gonna use for that, and connect this guy here. And just to see this real quick, I have we have the scalar field scope. Cool. So if we connect the scalar field scope there, and then I connect into the prop geometry, and I use this torus here, what we're using for the collision, and connect this into the proxy. And if we look at this and hide the polygon mesh, this is what I have. So basically, I'm gonna connect this guy, and this locator already kind of scale it and move it, right? So basically, the points that collide here are gonna get stuck, and the points that are like there is nothing going on right here, they're gonna be affected by the bounciness and the friction. So as soon as I connect this here now, and I press play. So again, this is pretty cool, right? Because now you have full control of what points are colliding and what points are bounced a bit, basically. So you can create different maps in different creative ways to use these two, which I feel like is a pretty neat function of these auto ports too. All right, let's move on. All right, so we have some new influences. I'll delete this color scope here. And we have 2 new ones, the ground plane influence, and then we have the collide field influence. I'll start with the ground plane. I'll just connect this into the influences, press D, and now we see a plane. If I press play, basically our points are colliding with that. And as you can see, it goes beyond this bounding box that we see here. So this is an infinite plane, basically. And then also it's an implicit collision. The difference between, let's say, probably you ask what is the difference between creating a plane here and connecting that into the collider and then using this? Well, as I said before, for one, this is an infinite collision, it's an implicit. This is an explicit collision. So the difference between an implicit and explicit collision, and not to try to get too technical, is that implicit collisions are going to be quick and fast for collision detection, and more efficient as well, and than explicit collision, that it takes a little bit more memory, and it's going to save more memory as well, to be honest. So if you need a plane, just a plane, I will stay with this guy. Obviously, you can daisy chain as many ground planes as you want and create some kind of a shape. And you can also obviously change the angle of this plane here with the normal. If you look at the parameters here, we have basically the bounciness, friction, and position, right, to move this plane around. And then we have these two push out and push out velocity. The one thing that you don't see here is this stickiness. So if you need that parameter, definitely stay with this in a plane. I'm talking about a plane, right? If not, I will highly recommend using this because it's gonna save. It's gonna be faster and more efficient. I'm gonna lower the bounciness just to show something how we can use this to push up, and then also let me lower the plane a little bit, 5, and let me actually go into an angle so it's a little bit different. So if I press play now, you see the particles gonna go and go and go, and they're gonna start low and go. Cool. The one thing that you see right away, if I press play, and let me press play and then stop here, as you can see, some of the points are going below the plane and some of the points are above. When they go below, they're going into negative. And to avoid that, what you can use, and that's why we have this option here, is just to push out those points into positive numbers. So if I do, I don't know, it's like very small values do a great effects on this. So just play with that, but I wouldn't go super high. Now, what you see here is that they bounce on the first, but then they push those points. So now they're sliding above that plane, as you can see. So that is one way to solve that issue there with that parameter right here. Then we have the push out velocity, and what this does, just to show you, basically is that if I add some value here, like 2 for example, that's pretty high, but just to make a point, is that when the points collide with this infinite plane, they're gonna push out on the direction of this, basically the normal, so if you want to call it like that, but basically it's gonna push out in direction of where this is pointing, on this positive direction basically. And there you go. It's a little bit crazy because it's a pretty high value, but again, this also can help this. If the push out doesn't do it, you can start pushing some velocity up. But you can also use it in different ways, right? I mean, this can be used in a completely different way. I mean, you don't have to use it for that. It can be used for some other creative way as well, which is neat. So that is the plane. That is the ground plane influence, basically. Infinite plane, implicit, faster, and efficient. Awesome. I'll just come back to normal here and turn off this push out velocity. All right. So let's talk about the collide field influence. For this, what you need is an SDF. We have a few. We have a plane field, and we have also the sphere field, and I believe there is maybe a couple of others. But basically, if I connect this here, and let me turn off this, we have a plane field. So basically, it's basically another infinite plane. And if you go inside the ground plane influence, you will see this guy, and it's right there. But obviously, this is a more high level tool because we have all these different parameters here. In this one, we have the position and normal. So that is one. And this is basically just a sphere, a point with a radius. That's it. But also you can use custom ones, right? You can use your own meshes to for this field influence. For that, we need an SDF, and for a polygon to do that, first we need to convert into a volume, and Bifrost provide you with different ways to convert polygons into a volume, but I like to use the mesh to volumes if I know that I'm gonna need just one. And by default, this is gonna store fog density, but we wanna change this into an SDF. And then to convert this into a field, because that's what it's expecting, we have a node called voxel field. And by default, this node is gonna grab the attribute, the SDF. By default, you can actually grab whatever attribute you want here, but by default, grab the SDF, which is perfect for this. So if I connect that here, I'm gonna disconnect the collider here just to show you that this field, how it works, and it's gonna collide now with the sphere. And basically, well, I'm sorry, with the torus. And basically this is doing the same thing that we were doing before without using the stickiness. It's just colliding and bouncing, and we have some friction. And we also have this push out and push out velocity, because that can also happen on this. But we also have this distant field velocity, and the way that you use this is, let's say that your collider is animating. What you can do is basically compute velocity and on this and create a field velocity, and you connect that here, so that way when this is moving and it's colliding, it's going to give you more accurate collisions when the collider is animated. You can also create your own custom field, right? Your own custom velocity field and connect it there. And just to show a quick example, I'm not going to create a custom field here, but I'm going to just change the value here in positive C. And if we look at the gizmo right here, the points basically what they're going to do, and they're going to be jumping on this way. There you go. So again, it can be used as they say so, but you can also use this in a completely different and creative way. So again, you can put any mesh, that you have, convert it into a volume, and then get a field and connect it here. And these two, just to repeat myself, are going to be faster, efficient, and quicker than using this. If you need a stickiness, you're going to have to stay with the collider. Otherwise, you can use these guys. It's not going to be a black and white. You can also, again, have both of them at the same time. So it just really depends what you need and use it for. And also one other thing that I want to show very quickly here about these influences. And let's do this with the ground plane because it's going to be more obvious. Remember, these are influences. So we can put any other force. So if I grab a turbulence influence, right, and connect this and daisy chain this here, let's do, I don't know, 5, and let me lower the drag a little bit. And if I press play, I'm going to turn off this. And sure, why not? Let's add this as well, and then let me add the torus back right there. All right, and if I press play now, remember we have the infinite plane. As you can see, what is happening now when these points get to the ground here, we're applying this force into these particles or points, right? So this is pretty cool as well. And remember, this is just one influence. We can daisy chain as many as we want. And there's like a lot of different ones. You can also create your own custom fields, remember, or forces. So again, this is actually a pretty neat thing that we can do with these influences. We can start using this in totally crazy ways. So yeah, I wanted to show this because this is just not a plane that you can collide points with, but you can also use it for other effects. Great. All right, let's. With that said, I'm gonna move on. Thank you. All right, so what else is new? Well, we have this new particle collision scope, and this basically is gonna help to show you a couple of things, or a few things, right? First, it's going to be able to collide. It's going to be able to display the collision position where the point hits the surface. It's going to also show you a self-collision between particles, and also it's going to point out when the point hits the surface where that normal is pointing out, plus the ID. Just to show you something very quickly here, let me go back into the influence. I'm disconnecting the collider. For this, in order to display this data, we need to go into the solver settings and store this. I'll start with the surface collision, and I have that on, right? And if I display ID, and if we press play now, nothing happens. as you can see. Why is that? Well, right now as version 2.6, these influences don't work with this. So for this to display these surface collisions, you need to use the collider. So that is another thing to keep in mind. As soon as I do this now, let me disconnect, oops, this should be in collider, not influences, and let me disconnect this guy here because I'm using the same torus here. As soon as I do this and now I press play, boom, we see the data. So that is something to keep in mind. This guy, to get this data out, you need to get it first in the solver, but you need to also use the collider to get the data out. And now we are seeing, let me make these points a little bit smaller. Let me actually hide the main simulation. So we see basically the normal ID and where that point is colliding with this surface. All right, so by default, self collisions are turned off because they're a little more expensive to run. So if you want to see the self collisions first, you need to turn this on and then also store them. So now if I press play, we see the points that are colliding with each other, and then also the ID plus also the points that are colliding with the surface. Remember, this is an influence, right? So that's why we are not seeing anything. And you can see that the points are in and out because they're colliding and they're moving around. And remember, these are self collisions. So that's why, yeah, you don't see them all the time. And these are the ones that are sliding and actually getting off of the surface. So, all right, how do we use this data? Well, for once, this give you the collide ID and the self-collide ID, so you can use that straight from this node. But in reality, what you want to use is the filter particles here. And this guy, if I just go back, by default, it's going to filter by surface collision. So if I connect this here now and press D, we're gonna see just the points. Basically, as you can see now, they are colliding with the surface. If you need to see filter by self collision, now we can do that as well. And now we have seen just the self collision particles. You can also filter by an attribute. By default, it's 0.8, so I can say, okay, give me all the particles that are greater or equal to 1 second. So now we see all the particles. Obviously, it's going to be the same. It's going to show me all the particles because I'm emitting once and all the particles are being born at the same time in this simulation. So yeah, so and the way that you use basically this, when you get these points, right, you can do different simulations and trigger other events into this particles system. So I have a little example here that I prepared beforehand because and let me go back into surface collision, make sure that this is 0, and we have these guys here, and I'll just show you very quickly what I'm doing on this. So I have another filter particle here. I'm gonna just connect it. I can use the same. But it's the same. I have this guy. It's the same. The only thing that I'm doing here, making sure that I'm doing, is transferring the color. By default, this transfer the point size and the point velocity. So if I want to grab that color that we have on those points, you need to transfer them. So this actually particle, the second particle can read that. Other thing they need to do too, just to keep in mind, let me disconnect this real quick and then let's preview this. Besides that, just to explain very quickly, I have a random property here. Basically, I'm randomizing the age limit. So particles are going to live between half a second and 4 seconds, and that is animated over time. Besides that, I have inherent velocity to 4. So the particles that are like colliding is going to inherit that velocity as well. So if I press play, and then, yeah, you can see that these particles are, even though I transfer that property, right, color here, I'm still not getting the color because you need to make sure also to connect this here as well. Then, and then just add color to it. And then as soon as I do that, now, as you can see, now we have all the secondary simulation also are getting the color from the main sim. And actually, let me disconnect this this fractal, so they all just get stuck there. I'm gonna use the same influence as this guy, so this is gonna give me a little bit more of a cool effect here. So connected the influence, so I can when the particles collide here, it's gonna be affected by this influence too. So now if I press play, you will see that we're getting this effect here now. And this, remember, these particles are emitting more and they're getting randomized by this H. But it's just the filter particles and they're emitting in those points. So again, we have something going on there, and I have some drag, by the way, too. But yeah, so you know, combining different basically simulations and just filtering something out. And why not, right? I can use now also these trails, so we can actually create trails from these guys. Also here in the trails, I'm transferring color, by the way, so we can get the same color and all. So now basically we're getting some trails as well, as you can see on those points. And as I said before, all this is getting, this is a little simulation inside too. There is like a feedback port, basically, an iterate node, a little solver inside. So we're running now 3, and then why not, let's jump into Aero as well. So I'm basically getting the color, right, and then applying that into the same. If you right click here, you can also say Aero source color property, and then just making sure to transfer that color from the particles into Aero. And if I press play now here, and we go back, basically we're gonna start emitting smoke and just running different simulations now on the, I mean, you can start, we're gonna start emitting now. It's getting a little bit slow. We're running 4 simulations at the same time without catching, so obviously and plus I'm recording, so you will want to basically start catching each step. That's what you want to do. But you can still run everything at the same time just to see. And then we have a smoke as well. And as you can see, if I start, let me turn off this here, these guys, and let me also turn off the, we don't see the color here. As of right now, version 2.6, we cannot preview the smoke color in the viewport, but we have this scope here, which is going to help us just to basically see what that when we render this, how this is going to be rendering. And these are just points, so if you really like this point, you can also render them. But yeah, so you can see, okay, cool, that's how basically my smoke is going to be looking like. And if I just press F here, and I have a material here, and then the other thing that I did, I just add that property into the scatter channel. And if I now like get the light on, and if I press render on Arnold here on the viewport, we should be able to see some color. So just loading. And now, as you can see, we get the same color. Obviously it's going to look a little bit better here because we are blending the colors and all that. Here's just points. Obviously we don't see the particles here because I'm not pressing F, and also you need to assign a material to get all the color. But yeah, just, I mean, this is nothing wow, but it's just to show how you can run basically different simulations from that filter data basically at the same time. So I mean, this is very, very simple. And but again, you know, with the new influences, you know, that we can add more influences on top of that when they collide. You can create some pretty cool effects here. And then again, you know, we are getting some smoke happening as well. Yeah, if I press 7, you can see a little bit, but everything gets blown out because probably my light is way too, way too high. But there you go. And with that said, let's move on. Thank you. Alright, so let's talk about some updates on the NPM solver. For one, it's faster, and then we got a new property and then also some new settings to play with. Alright, so I just dropped the basic npm snow graph, and then I just added the new ground plane influence here. If we go to the source npm snow, we have this option, the pass through points, which I already explained on the particle part, but if you miss it, I'm gonna run again very quickly. So basically what this does is gonna grab the point position from the input mesh, and it's gonna create a point in there. In this case, we have a torus here, right? And if I click here, it's gonna add a point on each vertex here. So that's what it's doing. You can also use the scatter points node, or you can also read a point cloud from a different DCC, or also within Bifrost, and that will work as well. Great. So what else? We have these pass-through properties. To explain this in a second, first I'm gonna talk about this point active attribute that we got. And basically this is a Boolean attribute, on and off, 1 to 0, 1, right? 1 or 0. And what it does is just activate these points basically. So if it's on, all the points are gonna be moving. If it's off, all the points are gonna be off. That's it. But we can play, and that's why we have this, and we can play with this actually, not just with this point active, but with all different attributes that you have here, and or any other custom attribute that you might have with these new pass-through properties. And basically what this does is, let's say that you have this active or any other property, right, and it's being updated before going to the source. Let's say with a falloff maybe, or some conditional, some kind of programmatic conditional, or a group, or can be anything, or a different solver, right? A growth solver or whatever. Those points, they're going to be updated, but in order for the solver to be aware of those properties being updated, what you need to do is add them right here. So that way, yeah, the solver is aware of those points being updated. The only thing that you have to make sure is, or be aware, is that the points, right, coming into the source are constant, meaning that they don't change over time. So the properties that are intended to get passed are correctly. For example, float properties, vector properties, right? They get interpolated correctly here. Obviously, a Boolean property that it won't be interpolated because it's a 0 to 1 property. But any property that you put here, basically, is going to be updated on each frame. All right. So how do we use this? And let's talk about the point active, which is the new one. How to use it. So let's scatter some points. I'm gonna create a mesh to volume, so we have we can actually scatter it on inside the mesh here. I'm gonna leave it by default on fog density, but I'm gonna change the resolution mode to absolute, scatter some points, and then just do 10,000, and then add this into the source. We're gonna use this new pass-through property here. Oops, I need pass-through points, I'm sorry. And there you go. And then we're gonna use a falloff for now. Can be anything, as I said, but I have already something prepared. I'm using the Manipulator field from Roland Reyer, which is a great some great compounds actually that make your life easier to manipulate data, or any other kind of like effect that you might want with some friendly falloffs on the viewport, right? The only thing that I did here, I believe, is I changed the magnitude, and then I lowered the attenuation. You can see this port here. The only I have, I mute this animation. If I mute it, I have some animation going on here. I'll show you this a little bit later to explain a point, but I'm gonna mute it for now. Cool, so they don't animate. All right, so what I'll do, I'm gonna sample this field. Oops, no sample alias, sample field, and then I'm gonna grab the position from the points, and then I sample the scalar field. I'm gonna move this a little bit to give more space. All right. And then I'm gonna create a new CGO property. So these are per point properties or attributes. When I say attributes and properties, I mean the same, by the way. There's no difference. And then I'll say, okay, greater. By the way, I'm gonna say greater than. So I'm grabbing this data, I'm sampling this, and basically I'm saying, are these points inside this greater than point? I don't know. It can be any value, 0.1. If yes, this is gonna give me 1. If not, it's gonna give me a 0. So it's a boolean. And since we're gonna play with the point active, which is a boolean, I can say point active here. And this, they're auto ports. So whatever you input here, this property is gonna change. So by default, it was a float, but as soon as I put this boolean property, it's gonna become a boolean. You can also change the port, obviously, here to make it a boolean by default, or whatever other property. It can be a vector, it can be a vector 4, a long, anything, right? Okay, so boolean. Okay, so we have active on point pass through property, but we don't add it here. If you don't add that property there, nothing is going to happen. So again, because we are manipulating this data before the source, so in order for the solver to be aware, we need to add this property here. So if I do that, as soon as I do that now, just these points inside this falloff here are being active because they are greater than 0.1. The rest is 0. Basically, remember 1 and 0, true or false. And then, you know, there's some firmness here by default, and they get in basically on top of each other. Cool, very neat. And that's what it does basically. Remember, the only thing, if you change the point count, this won't be working. It won't work correctly. And again, this is just one property. Obviously, we can change any other property that we want. So if I do again another point set geo property here, and let's say that this time we change okay, the firmness, so it's very clear what happened. Remember, what, like, look at this, what's happening right now. So now this is going to be a float, right? Firmness. So I'm going to say if, I'm going to say condition, if this is greater than 0.1, if this is true, make the firmness 0. If not, just put it by default, which the default is 1. And if I connect this now here and I type this property, so it's going to be point firmness. Remember, I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to make it, it's going to be updated also. And if I press play now, it's going to be a completely different behavior. Basically, the points are not going to have any firmness, and they're going to just melt, or yeah, basically melt, right? There's no firmness on these points. So there you go. Again, so you can play with any properties here before, and then pass those properties into the solver, so it can read that activate those properties or values being either evaluated each frame or just one, but it needs to be passed. Customs or the properties from the solver that you can manipulate. So that's actually pretty cool. I believe that this is a welcome and a very cool addition to this NPM solver. So now this is going to allow you to do some pretty cool stuff and in very creative ways. So play with that because it's going to open up a lot of new workflows. All right, so I told you that I have an animation here, right? Just to show you very quickly. Unmute selected. So let me actually throw a scalar field scope here too, so you can see what's happening before we play the animation. And this is gonna go into my torus, and let's put this in proxy. I'm gonna turn off so we can see just what's happening here basically. So you can see now we have this value here, and those points getting activated, and also the firmness. Let me just, I mean, that was just to show you that you can add any property, but that kind of looks lame like that, right? Kind of boring. If I press play now, you can see this is updating the animation, right? But what is happening here, that is not keeping the values that they were already there. So if you need to keep values from the previous iteration of this animation, what you need to do is basically run this into in a solver, because right now what is happening is changing. And then just to be very clear, basically if you will go into numerics, I like numerics because it's actually more it can give you a better understanding what is happening. As you can see here, we have some values here, 0.1, blah blah blah. Everything is basically or almost above 0.1. Some of them they're not, and then the rest is 0. So that's why you see that behavior, right? And then as soon as I play this here, let me turn off the influence so we can see this just completely the data here. This getting back to 0, so it's not keeping the values from this fall off here, right? And if I show you what the I'm sure you guys saw this, right? And if I press play, basically these points are being activated in a growth solver, and that data is getting all that data is going around, right? It's getting activated, but those values being activated, they're getting stuck in a solver. And I'll show you this in a second, so it's a little bit better. It's a little bit clearer. What we see here basically is the new npm snow scope, and this is showing the point firmness attribute here, by the way. But basically that's what it is here. It's running first before going to the source. This is running into a solver, and those points being active. But the values here are always kept from the previous iteration, and for that you're always going to need some kind of a solver. And here it's just updated and it's moving. Okay, so I'll open that graph that we just saw on the Twitter there. So I have it already on here, but in case that you wonder where is this, if you go into the Windows Bifrost browser and you navigate here into the snow, you're gonna see this snow activation graph. This is the whole graph. I'm not going to talk about everything, but I just want to show you a couple of things here. Okay, so we have a polygon here, then here's where the solver is, right? If we go inside here, they're converting this polygon into a volume, fog volume, scatter some points, point scope, a computer frame. If you don't know what is this is going to speed up the process of the data. So basically what this does, it computes the data is coming into this node on this frame, and that's it. So it's computed once and then it doesn't compute anymore. So sometimes you can do this because in order to speed up some data is not being updated and you just need it once, right? So that's going to help on it's going to speed up the process. Then we have a point here where basically the point is going to start here. And we have this basic infection compound, which is a growth solver. You can find also this in the browser, and if you go into the scatter pack here, you're gonna find this point infection. Then we are giving a size to these points, and then that is getting converted into an SDF now. No, fuck an SDF level set. If we see this, and I'm gonna turn off the polygon. We have this, and we have this infection solver being activated. The important property here is this emit property, which is a normalized property, basically 0 to 1, right? And that's getting updated and it's getting saved. All right, so then another fog volume here, and then this is a new node, by the way, that I'll explain in a second. It scattered some points, and basically what this does is it calculates the amount of points that you need in the scatter based on what your settings on the solver. So it's going to give you a stable count, but you can also, as I showed you before, you can also just put your own amount. But this is just something that it helps if you need that kind of resolution coming from the setting solvers, right? And then we have another computer frame, and basically those are the points that are gonna get passed here on the pass-through points. Before going there, this is getting into another compound, the points, the volume, and again the polygon. And I'll turn off this, go back to the beginning, and go inside here. So what we have here is that this point, that point property. Remember, when something gets converted into a volume, remember before it was everything was converted into an SDF. So by default, voxel underscore, that is a prefix that actually Bifrost adds just to make so you know, then you can say, oh, these are attributes from the volume attributes now. And then to convert something to a field, you use this box of field. So you change this to the emit. Then we are sampling again this field. We are getting the position from the npm points, right? And then we are doing some logic here. And basically this is saying greater to equal to 0.7. Any point that is greater to equal to 0.7, greater or equal, is going to be true, 1. The rest is going to be 0. We have a scope here too. And if I show you this real quick, we have this. Points are being activated, but the difference between this and just what I show you on my setup is that the data is staying here, right? Because we have a solver, and that's why this data is staying. And to see this very clearly, we're gonna go into numeric because I like numbers, as I said, because show you exactly what's happening. So we have at the beginning the points are being already have some data, but the rest of the points, if you look very carefully, it's going to be all 0, 0, so they're not being active. And if I press play now, the thing that is happening here, as you can see, this is getting updated, right? But the point data is when the solver runs through, it's getting it's saving that data. So it's not going back to 0 after what was happening with the falloff, for example. And that's basically saying, so every point is always activate now, right? Because it's greater than 0.7. So that's what's happening here. All right, and then after that, basically all this data is getting passed. Let me preview this now. Point active, and that is getting passed here. So the solver is aware that that data is getting updated on each frame. We have pass-through points, we have the active, and that's it. There is another source npm snow for the ground, and the collider is using the new stickiness property that we already talked about it. This is just for resolution, basically. If you uncheck the conditions here, it's going to go to a lower resolution. To like a high resolution. So if you look at the viewport, I uncheck that. I believe I unchecked it. No, I did not. So it's going to go to 0.007 now. Oops, I need to go to the beginning, obviously. So we reset the port feedback here. And yeah, so it's way more resolution here. I'm not gonna do that now because I'm recording. This is to also speed up simulation, to iterate quickly, to use these simulation bounds. This is a different way to actually update attributes that you wanna update during simulation. Basically, we are updating the point. We are grabbing that point firmness, and since that's getting updated through the solver as well, it's influencing this other property here, the point viscosity. I'm gonna talk about this. This is a new node, by the way, that erase properties, a lot of different properties at the same time. You can also just do asterisk here, and it's gonna lead everything. But in this case, I'm not gonna use that. I'll talk about this in soon. Then we have the npm snow scope, and basically what this does is just showing you what this data looks like. What we talk about by default is firmness, and basically firmness is just basically how resistant the snow is to yielding. That's what it is. That's what this does. And this, you can change how the firmness starts and ends, the colors and all that, and you can see this is getting updated during the simulation. And since I was talking about this, because this is getting updated, is influencing a different property. That's another way that you can also update properties. Okay, stop repeating yourself. So, and then also we can see packing, and packing basically is whether the particles are compressing or expanding. But this is, again, is just to show data, and if the data is working correctly, just to scope that data, basically, right? And there is some post-processing here that you can read what it's doing, and then some rendering. And that's it basically for the npm. One thing that I'm gonna mention very quickly is that also these new properties are you're gonna find it in the fluid and in the sun. So you're gonna find the same two or three things: pass-through properties, pass-through points, and properties points, and active, and the fluid as well. So you can play with that in the fluid, which is gonna give you some another way to manipulate this, right? These two are very similar, by the way. The only difference between these two is that the snow is a more complex model. We have this initial firmness and hardening properties, which this does not. So this is gonna actually use a little bit more memory. It's gonna be more expensive to run than this. So really, depending what you do, you can use either this or this. And also something that I wanna mention here, because this has been asked to me more than a few times. The source, it says source npm snow, but it doesn't mean that this node just does snow simulations. You can do any kind of granular simulation with this node. So don't get confused by the name npm snow. It's just a name, and it has some defaults just to act a little bit like a snow. But you can use it for any kind of granular simulation. And so yeah, the same with this, by the way. Obviously, fluid is going to be a little bit different because we have surface tension and viscoelasticity. That's a little bit difficult to pronounce there. But yeah, and that's it, guys. Again, some very welcome additions on the NPM. It's getting better and better, and just play with it and have fun. I hope that this was helpful. Yeah, let's move on. Thank you for watching. All right, let's talk about Aero very quickly. Aero got a couple of updates, some good ones. One of the things that got updated, it was like how fields now are applied to the voxels, which is going to make it actually run a little bit faster. And also we have bug fixing, obviously, and then some new debugging tools that I'll show you in a second, diagnostics, that before this menu right here, we didn't have it. So I grabbed this example from the Bifrost browser, and it's this guy here, just in case. So if I press play, we have some smoke rising, and it should be color, but as of right now, 2.6, we cannot preview color in the viewport for smoke, but we have this handy voxel color scope, which is going to show you basically how your sim is going to look like when you render. And if you really like how these points look like, obviously you can always render. They are just points, so you can render them too. We have this Aero color post process on this graph, which basically helps when you do color on Aero. It prevents for the edginess to get dark. So this is a post process, and I want to mention that these two are not new to 2.6, but I just want to are basically new to 2.51. And some people probably don't know them yet, but they are very useful to preview also the color of your smoke. So just to show you very quickly, I have an assigned material, and when this comes and it's in final, so we can render. If I hit render now, it's gonna show you basically the smoke and the color, and it's very similar to let me just unhide that because we have it connected to similar. Obviously this is going to look better because it's blending and all that, so it's going to look much nicer. I have a directional light, so it's kind of like a boring lighting here, but it's pretty straightforward, and you don't get any of the dark edginess with this guy, so you can play with the boxes to dilate and all that. It's pre-molting. Basically, if you go inside, you can have a look how this is built. Anyway, there's some cool nodes that we're adding 2.51. Let's talk about what is new. Diagnostics, we did have this in 2.51, but the only thing that basically we could preview was the colliders. And if I go back now, and let me go back to my smoke, basically you could preview the volume that this is colliding with. And this is again not new to 2.6. This was here before, but this was the only option that we could basically see when we were playing with this, right? So if I just play, this is gonna collide and it's gonna go around the torus, which is great to see that, obviously, because you always need to see how this is working. But now we have some new options on the solver itself. So for once, we can see how our forces are being applied into this. For example, the voxel velocity. So how the velocities, basically the forces are doing what they are doing to this smoke, which is actually cool. So we can display the fraction. That means that how many strands curves we're gonna see. So the higher you go, this is gonna get more dense, basically. And again, if you like how this looks like, you can always render them because they are just strands. This is the length of the strands, and I'm just gonna keep playing. And this obviously gonna get updated real time. It's gonna get a little bit slower because we're processing more data to show you with the collider and all that stuff. We have this new numeric property here too. So if let me go back and disconnect, or actually just not show the volume, and turn off the voxel, the flow lines, and then let's put a property. Let's copy paste this same property here, and basically this is gonna show me how the values of the density that you see on. You can obviously change this to any other property like temperature, which might be more helpful, right? So again, and this is going to be updated too. So that's another cool thing that we have. We have this displayed 3 levels, right? Which basically is showing you the multi-grid resolution of the voxels, basically. That we also see this in the volume scope as well. So this is just something that was added on the Aero, which is good to have too. And then we have this new prop geometry and prop property. To make this work, you basically need something like a plane, points, whatever you want. So I just created a plane here, basically, and I added some more resolution, more points to work with, and I have it right here, so I'm gonna hide it. And I'm gonna connect this into the prop geometry now. And basically what this is gonna do is gonna show me this property right I have right now. This is not gonna show with light on, so turn off that. I'm gonna also turn off the smoke here. And now basically what you're seeing, if I press play, is the fog density. And basically a slice of the fog density, because the cool thing that you can is move this around and you see how the fog density is, what it's doing on each slice, basically. This is kind of like a slice moving. Obviously you can preview or actually debug or view other properties like voxel color, for example, which actually this is gonna be even cooler when you move it around the slice around, right? So yeah, I mean, again, this is great for debugging and also just to see different properties or attributes. So to see those, or what you can actually input here, you can always see, and if you press W between the lines, you're gonna see all the different attributes that you can actually see. So again, this is great that we have this now. We can debug and see if our data is working correctly and how we are expecting, basically. Besides that, remember the new influences like the ground plane, right? They all work with also Aero, and the same with the collide field influence. So remember, all influence work with all simulation framework. And I believe with that said, thank you for watching. Hey everyone, so this is the end. I hope you guys enjoy part 1 and part 2 of these videos and learn something new here and there, right? I want to just say a couple of things here. I will highly recommend that you guys go and check the release note for 2.6. There is like some compatibility information. We have a new version of Maya USD. Actually, before 2.6, 2.0 was the latest one, but we just got a new version as well a few days ago, or actually more than 2 weeks ago. But that works also with 2.6. So there is a new Arnold for Maya as well. There is like the big thing here, the open source Bifrost USD, which is going to allow people that wants to get in there, start creating low-level operators. We got some new Bifrost USD nodes as well. There is also some bug fixing in the read mesh USD and the read curve USD. There is some improvements on how to read the Alembic data as well. Now it can handle index property much better, and it can result in smaller Alembic files when you save them. And definitely check this change in detail. It's going to tell you way more. And I didn't even mention that some of the Rebel package nodes are now part of the core. For example, the update point neighbor is part of the core, and then there is also been some updates on the nodes of the Rebel pack. So again, there is a lot of stuff, SDK, USD, simulation, and whatnot. So check this out for sure. Don't miss it. With that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will talk to you later, guys. Cheers.